it's time to flaunt your inner designer because we're about to learn some CSS. To start off, I want to show you this website. If you look at it, well, it's quite pretty. Look at that. That's really nice. Now, hopefully, in the future, we can create something like this, but I want to show you what this website would look like without CSS. Here it is. Pretty impressive, right? With just CSS, you'll be able to create something like this. So let's get started, shall we? I've created here for us a simple website. Nothing that we haven't seen before. You can see that I have created semantic tags with header, nav, an unordered list that has some links, a P2 and a P tag that's wrapped in another semantic tag called section. Okay, so again, nothing crazy. If I go to the About page, it's the exact same thing except for the About li doesn't have an anchor tag. And then same with login. Okay, so let's talk about CSS. The way that we would add CSS to something like this is, well, we create a CSS file. So let's do that. I'm going to create a new file that I'm going to save. Let's call it style.css. If I save that, you'll see at the bottom over here that Sublime Text now has CSS as the file type. The rules with CSS are very simple. We essentially have a selector, and then we have these squiggly brackets, and within it, we put our property, semicolon, and then value. Then we have this special character as well at the end. And that is pretty much CSS. You know this, you can write CSS. Just like HTML, just a couple of syntactic rules, and once you get used to it, it's very, very simple. But obviously, this doesn't really mean anything, so let's write actual code here. I'm going to comment that out by again doing command / in Sublime Text. You can see that the commenting is different than in HTML. And let's say that we want to make this home text red. The way we would do it is we want to select what's called the selector. So here we want to say that the H2, we want that to be red. So all I would say is H2, curly brackets, and then within here I want to say the property. I want to change the color to the value that is red. So if I save that and refresh, well, nothing happens, and that's obvious, right? Because how does this file know that this file exists? We have to link it somehow. And we do that in the head. And we haven't talked too much about the head tag element in the HTML section. But by now, you can probably tell that head just contains information about what the page needs. Maybe not the stuff that we see on a web page, other than the title, but meta tags and information that we need for the website. Look at. So in here, we can actually link to this style sheet that we call style.css with a link tag. And this link tag allows us to link this HTML file to something else. And again, Sublime Text has something very useful here. If I hit tab, look at that. It auto-fills it for me. These are the standard attributes that you'll see to link to CSS. So you just have to get used to it, and eventually it'll become second nature. So we have REL here, which is the adding attribute for relation. It just specifies what relationship this link will have. And we have the default style sheet. And then for the type, this is the media type. We want to say that it's a text CSS file. We're essentially telling HTML, hey, just a heads up, we're linking to a CSS file here. And in the href, this should be familiar. We're going to link to style.css. So if I type in style.css and save, let's refresh, turns red. And just to let you know that index.html is in the same folder as style.css. We can check it over here. If I click on exercise, you see that, I have style.css with index.html. Perfect. Okay, now what if we also want to make the paragraph over here the type of color as well? Well, again, we'll do the selector, and then we'll do color. Let's do pink. I save, refresh, and it's pink. Hopefully you can see that. You also see here that Sublime Text does some really nice coloring for us. So if I, for example, I put a property that doesn't exist, like a misspelled color, well, you see that it doesn't highlight it properly with the blue color, and you know that you've made a mistake. Again, another great feature of Sublime Text. So CSS, what does it actually stand for? Well, it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And style sheets, that makes sense that, we're creating style sheets, but what does cascading mean? Well, cascading means that it always takes the selector that is at the end. And that's simplified terms, but I want to demonstrate for you what that means. So let's say at the bottom over here, I do this again. Paragraph, I want color to be green. Well, if I save this, what do you think will happen? Let's refresh and see. It turns green. And why is that? Well, because it's cascading. It's saying, okay, I'll set H2 to red. Okay, I'll set paragraph to pink. And then it says, okay, I'll set P to green. So you can see here, as it trickles down and cascades, it takes the last input that it receives for a specific selector. We'll get more into the cascading effects of CSS in a later video, but I want you to understand the basic concept around it. Okay, I also wanted to show you something cool they can do with Chrome. And we did this in the first couple of video series, but now you'll actually understand what it means. So again, view, developer tools. And from now on, I'll be using this shortcut to open it, and you'll be able to do it as well. And if you remember, we have our style tab. And if we click on the style tab, we have the HTML on the left, styles over here, and nothing for the styles. But if I now go into my home, and I click on that, it'll show you color red. So Google Chrome allows us to see our CSS styles. So I can even add stuff here, and I could say background color. Let's do black. Look at that. So this is a really good way to play with your website and add colors. You can check and uncheck here. And also, if you see something on a website that you really, really like, you can go to that element. Let's try it off here. Let's go to why.com. And let's say that we really, really want to know how this was made. We can right click, do inspect. It'll take us exactly to that element, and then we can see here some of the properties, the CSS properties that they've used. And same here, you can see that the background color is this, and so on and so forth. Okay, let's close that for now. The last thing I want to leave you with is, what if, let's close this, what if I also want the About page to have styles? And same with the Login page. As you can see, there's no style for these ones. But we want the same thing for the About and Login page. Well, as you can imagine, we copy the link tag, and we go to About, we link it onto here, and then Login, we can again link it here. I save both of these files, and now if I refresh and go to About, look at that. We have our styles. And you may be wondering, well, what if I want different styles maybe for the login? I want this to be blue instead. Well, we can actually create multiple style sheets. So I can say, for example, let's create a new file, and we'll call it style2.css. I save that, and this time I'm going to say that I want my H2 to have color blue. I save that. I go into my login HTML, and now I'll make login reference the second style sheet instead of the first one. So now if I refresh, login is referencing our style2 CSS, but all the other ones are still referencing the old one. Okay, I lied. There is one last thing that I want to add, and that is that this is the common way of adding styles. But there is actually two other ways that you won't see as often, especially when you're starting off, but I wanted to show it to you so that you're not surprised. The first way of doing it is something called inline styles. And this was the original way that we incorporated styles into our HTML. And that is by specifying within the element, let's go with header over here. We want to say style, so it has a style attribute. And then within here, we can do background color. Let's do green. And refresh, and we're at the about page right now. We changed that for index.html. So let's go over here and look at that. We have the green background. And if you want to add more, again, we do color red. Let's save and refresh. And look at that. The header has the color red. And you'll see here that these ones are still purple, well, because they are link tags and have the default linking. Okay. So that's one way. And the third and last way is in the head, you can actually create style tags. And then within these style tags, you can enter CSS. So if you just refresh here, so we have a fresh, clean slate, I can now say all the p tags, or let's do li this time. So all the lists, I want the list to have background color of purple. So if I save this and refresh, everything is purple, and that looks pretty yucky. We can keep adding stuff on here, and I can say color white, save, refresh, and it changed the color to white. Now, you may be wondering, why don't we just do it like this? This seems a lot simpler than linking to another CSS file. Well, the reason is that for this website, everything is fairly small. It's just a couple lines of CSS, but you can imagine with websites, as they get bigger and bigger, you'll have hundreds and hundreds of lines of CSS, and having one massive file will be very, very challenging to maintain. You can also think of it as if you were working on an HTML and you also had a team of designers that were working on a CSS file. You want to have a separation where we have some team members working on the CSS and then some team members working on the HTML. And that is a concept called separation of concerns. It's a fancy way of saying that everybody just worry about what they're good at. So HTML, just worry about text, and CSS, just worry about styles. This phrase, separation of concerns, is something that we'll encounter throughout later videos when we get into JavaScript and React, and it's a very, very important concept in web development and computer science in general. So we will get back to that, but you know that it'll be a phrase that will keep coming up. So for now, let's delete this. Let's keep things the way that we have it. Let's refresh. And in the next video, I'm going to show you a couple of CSS properties that are more exciting than just color and background. I'll see you in that one.